Okay, so where we left off last time was I just gotten dropped off at the hotel, or not at the hotel, the hospital, and they admitted me in to outpatient care, and they're like, from what we see, we need to get you into a CT scan so that we can see what's going on. I'm like, okay. Back in 2017, I had a kidney removed. It had a large cancerous mass that was found on it. So they went in and they were like, instead of trying to do the whole chemo treatment, we're just going to take the whole kidney out. So they went ahead and took the kidney. And every year since then, I've had to go in and get CT scans. So when they said we need to get you into a CT scan, I was like, okay, I've done it, 6 or 7 times now. No big deal. I can do it. No big deal. They're like, okay, we're going to wheel you out into the lobby room while we get the CT room set up, and we're going to try and get you in there as quick as possible. Like, okay. They give me a 1 liter bottle of water, and they're like, we need you to drink this whole bottle before we can get you into the CT scan. This didn't seem unrealistic to me because what they were going to do was called a CT scan with contrast. And every time in the States that I've had this done, they've always given me, 2 cups of water with something mixed into it to, I guess, make my insides glow or something on the picture, just so it could be read easier. So I'm like, okay, but they hand me the water and the water's closed, so I don't know why there's nothing mixed into it. But I was like, yeah, maybe that's just the way they do it out here. During this time that I'm waiting, Randy, his girlfriend Robin, meets me at the hospital. She got back off the boat sooner than Randy did, so she hopped on a cab and came up. She was sitting with me, and she's helping me fill out the paperwork while I'm trying to down this bottle of water. And while we're sitting there, the admissions person for the hospital comes out, and she's like, okay, so how are we going to pay for this treatment today? And I'm like, that's really the farthest thing from my mind right now, but I understand you guys need to be paid. I'm like, well, technically I don't have any insurance because my insurance was terminated on Friday, the day that I left my job. But I had the diving insurance. So I'm like, okay, great. This is gonna save my butt. So I got lucky with that. So I'm pulling up all the information that I can about that, and I'm like, here's my receipt number for me paying for it. Here's the reference number for the company for my account, because I didn't have really, since it was just a week long worth of coverage, I didn't have patient records. It's just a reference number. And there's an 800 number on there and an international 24/7 emergency hotline number. So I pull it up all on my phone, and I give it to Robin, and I'm like, can you hand this to the administrations lady? And I said, just have them call the 800 number. They should be open right now. It's Tuesday at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Somebody should be there to talk to them. So the admissions lady comes out, and she's like, I can't call this number. I'm like, well, why can't you call this number? She's like, it's a US 800 number. I can't call that from here. I'm like, okay, well, use my phone. And she's like, no, I can't do that. And I'm kind of looking at her like, why? Why can't you use it? Do you want me to dial the number for you? And she's like, no. And she's like, I'll try again. So she goes back to her office. She doesn't take my phone. She just takes the 800 number. So while she's back there, I'm flipping through the website again, trying to find the international 24/7 emergency line that I saw. And I find that, and she comes back out a little while later, and she's like, yeah, I've tried to call them, and I've tried to email them, and I can't get anybody to reply to me. How are we going to treat this, because we can't admit you any further until we get some kind of payment on record. And I'm like, okay, well, here's the international 24/7 number. And I explained to her that the name of this, it's a specific scuba diving insurance. And what I found odd about this is that she had not heard of this company before, but this is the only hospital on the island that not only had a CT scanner, but it also had the only hyperbaric chamber, which a hyperbaric chamber is used for often for dive-related injuries. So I would imagine that any kind of dive accident that they've ever had on this island has always come through here, and I would be very surprised if I'm the first person to come through with this insurance, because it's a very popular insurance among the scuba community. So I gave her the international number, and she goes in, she comes back out, and she's like, yeah, I can't get anybody on that either. So she's like, okay, I'll go back and I'll try again. We'll catch back up later. So now I give my phone to Robin, and I'm like, Robin, it's an international phone line. I'm like, we don't know really how to call internationally. The pluses and the brackets and the zeros in the brackets and the dashes. We don't know what needs to be typed in. I wish they would make that easier. But I'm like, Robin, do me a favor and take my phone, call the 800 number, and I would be highly surprised if there isn't a simple, as soon as you call, they say, if you're trying to get in touch with our 24/7 emergency line, press 1 option. And sure enough, she called it up. Doot, 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 doot. If you're trying to get in touch with our 24/7 emergency line, press 1. And, hit 1, sped right through, no problem. Why the admissions lady couldn't do this, again, I don't know. It still kind of puzzles me. But Robin got on there, and she spoke to him, told him what the situation was. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to go ahead and open up a case. We'll get an agent. It looks like we have an agent on the island that's associated with us, so they'll be in touch with the hospital, and we'll start getting everything going to make sure everything's fine. At this time, the admissions lady comes back out again. She's like, I still can't get in touch with anybody. And I'm like, okay, how much is this how much are you needing as a down payment to further any of this along? And she's like, oh, it's going to come out to be $1,500 US. I'm like, okay, as long as you're not trying to, dock me for 20 grand right away, just go ahead and put it on my credit card, and I'll take it up with the insurance company later. So I give her my card just so that she can get her paperwork going and we can start moving this along, because I'm reeling in pain here, and I really, the last thing I want to do is sit here and try and fight about a bill that hasn't even been generated yet. So we're sitting here. I'm still drinking my water, and while I'm drinking the water, 1 hour passes, 2 hours pass, 3 hours pass, and I look over to Robin, and I'm like, didn't they come out here and say that they were going to try and get me into the CT scan as quick as possible? And she's like, yeah, we've been out here a long time. And I'm, just sitting here trying to drink this whole bottle of water that they gave me. Usually in the US, when I have to get my CT scan done, I usually drink my water, and it takes about 45 minutes for the contrast solution to get into my body before they can take me into the CT room. But, I've pretty much finished this water, and I'm sitting here for almost 3 hours now waiting to get taken into the CT scan room. Eventually they come out, they come and I'm like, are we almost ready? And they're like, yeah, we're still prepping. Eventually they get everything going, and they're like, okay, we're going to go ahead and take you over to the CT room. And the way that the hospital is set up is there is a main emergency building, or a main outpatient building, and then the second floor had the emergency services. And then there was a small kind of parking lot in front of there, and then on the side there was kind of like garages. And inside the garage bays is when they had the hyperbaric chamber and the CT scan machine. So I walk out of the lobby and walk across the hotel, or walk across the hospital parking lot, and walk over to the CT room, and they're like, okay, we need you to go ahead and lay down on the bed. So, like I said, I've done this 5 or 6 times before, so I sit down with my feet facing towards the machine. And the nurse there says, no, we need you to sit the other way. And I'm like, are you sure about that? Because the pillow is back here at the other side of the head, and every time I've done this, I've always gone in the same way. She's like, no, we need you to flip around. Well, again, the whole reason for this is because I was having stomach pains. So every time I have to move or get up, it's excruciating to try and move. And since I had already sat down, now, I needed help. Somebody's trying to pull me up so I can stand up so that I can flip back around. And I'm a big guy. So a lot of these nurses and assistants are very tiny, skinny people. So it takes a couple of them to help me around. And eventually we get up and I flip around. And as soon as I sit down, the doctor comes over and says, whoa. No, you need to be sitting the other way. Oh, jeez, I knew it. I knew I needed to be sitting the other way. So they help me back up again. They flip me back around the right way. And I'm laying down, and they're like, okay, well, you need to scoot further in, further down the bed. So I'm trying to scoot the best that I can. Of course, this is a painful process as well. But I get to where they want me to be, and they go ahead and start the machine up, and I kind of overhear them, and they're like, when was the last time we used this? And they're like, oh, it was with that guy a couple months ago with the chest thing, right? And I don't know if they knew that I heard them say that. I'm just thinking, oh, no. This machine hasn't been turned on in months. But that's okay. We're still good. They know what they're doing. So they fire up the machine, and they go ahead and they send me in on a first pass. And I guess this is like some kind of calibration pass. It's, same thing I would expect to happen in the U.S. And they pull me back out, and they're like, okay. The doctor comes out. He says, you've had contrast before. And I'm like, yeah, I've had it before. And he's like, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and start get the real image going this time, and we're going to shoot the contrast through you. I'm like, all right. So they hook my IV up to the machine that pumps in the contrast dye. And I can see the machine starting to pump the medicine, and he's like, all right, I need you to breathe. Keep breathing. And I'm almost to the point where I'm hyperventilating, and I'm like, they've never been so adamant about my breathing when I've done this in the States. So I'm kind of, like, why do you keep telling me to breathe? Because I am breathing. And he runs around to the control center, and as soon as I feel that contrast go into my IV, all of a sudden, all that water that I drank earlier is like, nope, we don't like this. And I give it about 2 seconds, and then all of a sudden it's just all over the machine. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's just once. And then I felt another one coming up. And this time, for some reason, it was so bad it caused me to sit up in the machine. So I sit up, of course, hurting my stomach again, and I just all over the floor. And as soon as I throw up on the floor, I pass out. And that's it. And the next thing I know, I'm waking up, and my head hurts, and I'm in the middle of the machine. It's kind of a big donut that you ride through, and I'm in the middle of it, and I just passed out. So I wake up, and I don't know where I'm at. I don't know what's going on. I feel trapped. I feel claustrophobic, and I start to panic, and I start reaching and scraping at the machine. My guess is that I passed out. Once I passed out, I fell back and I hit my head on the edge of the bed. And since I was passed out, they went ahead and sent me through to try and get the image anyway. Might as well. So then they pull me back out, I start to calm down and get my composure. And the doctor runs around and he's like, I need you to sit up, I need you to sit up, I need you to sit up. And he's grabbing me by the back and he's trying to push me up into a sitting position. But again, I'm here because of stomach pains. So while he's trying to push me, my stomach's like, no, we're not doing this. So I'm trying to kind of push back against him, saying, I need to take this slower. At the same time, I'm still just covered in throw up. The machine's covered in throw up. There's all kinds of people in the room now that weren't in there just a minute ago. There's new people that are rushing in with bottles of oxygen, and they're putting me on an O2 mask. So I finally sit up, and they're like, I need you to tell me how many people are in the room. Can you tell me who each person is? And I'm like, yeah, you're the surgeon, you're the doctor, you're a nurse, you're the orderly. I have no idea who you are. You just came in here, kind of thing. I went and talked to Robin later on that evening. She's like, yeah, you went in there, and then about 30 or 45 minutes later, all of a sudden, all these people started rushing in there with stuff. I'm like, yeah, well, that's what happened. I passed out. So they came back, and they're like, all right, we're going to admit you up to the emergency room area now, while we wait for the images to come back from the CT scan, and hopefully we got something useful. I'm like, okay. So they call a cab up. And I'm like, why do I need a cab to go across the parking lot that I just walked against? And like, well, we need to take you around to the side of the building where the emergency room entrance is. I'm like, okay. I'm still not really sure why we need a cab, but it turns out it was the cab that came turned out to be the same cab that took me from the resort to the hotel. It was Kelly. So, friendly face. Somebody I can recognize that hasn't poked me and stabbed me in the belly yet or tried to hurt me. So felt kind of good. So I get into the cab, and they take me maybe 50, 100 feet around the corner. But the way that this is set up is you've got the main hospital, and then you got the emergency room that sits on the top, and you kind of back over here, you've got the CT scan of the room. Well, this road that goes up goes way high. It's a very steep angled road. Of course, that probably didn't look, let's see. So if it was here, like it came up this way. So there was the second floor here. It came up. Again, I don't know if that looked good. So he pulls up to the top, and they get me into a room. They lay me down, and we're sitting in there for a little while, and I get a call from Randy, and Randy's like, I'm at the hospital and I can't find you. I'm like, well, what do you mean you're at the hospital and you can't find me? I'm like, this emergency room has 12 beds. I'm the only person here, and I'm the only white guy anywhere around this building. It shouldn't be too hard to find me. He's like, I'm here and I can't find you anywhere. And he's like, hold on a minute. And he hangs up, and they're like, okay. And so Robin, his girlfriend, was there. We're kind of laughing at him like, what are you doing, Randy? How can you not find me? So we're sitting there, and we're just kind of chatting and waiting for the doctor to come, and all of a sudden, about an hour later, Randy shows up. He comes in. He's like, you're not going to believe what happened. We're like, where have you been? He's like, I went to the receptionist at the resort and told him I needed to go to the hospital. So they called me a cab, and they took me to the hospital. They took me to the wrong hospital. So I've been wandering around a whole nother hospital looking for you on the other side of the island. You're like, okay, Randy, well, that's fine. He's like, well, how did you get over? And he's like, well, I went to the reception desk at the hospital, and he told them that he was at the wrong hospital. He needed to get to the other hospital. So they called an ambulance for him, threw him in the back of the ambulance, flicked on the lights, and raced him to the other side of the island to the hospital that I was at. And he got out, and they were like, okay, that'll be $14. It's like, It's like, I don't know. I didn't even get an ambulance ride up here. I had to take a taxi cab. I love Kelly. Kelly's a great guy. But I didn't even get an ambulance ride to the hospital. And Randy's just touring the island in one. So he got there. We had a chuckle about that. And, so we're sitting there and we're discussing, how the dive went. What did I miss? Bummed out. And the doctor comes in. And the doctor's like, so we got the CT scan back, but since you had the throw up episode, we didn't get a good scan on what happened, or we didn't get a good scan to see what's going on. So we're going to try and do an ultrasound on you. And I could hear somebody outside the door say, yeah, we should have done an ultrasound to begin with. I was like, oh, geez, okay. So they come in with another liter bottle of water and say, we need you to drink this for the ultrasound. So they give me the bottle. I go ahead, crack it open. I start drinking it a little bit. And they're like, okay, we're going to go ahead and get the ultrasound ready. I'm thinking, well, I hope you can get it ready quicker than you got the CT scan ready, because that took forever. So we're sitting there, and again, we're just chatting. I'm kind of sipping on the water. And a nurse comes in and says, are you drinking anything? And I'm like, yeah, they told me to drink this bottle of water. And she's like, no. You shouldn't be drinking anything. I'm like, well, they told me I needed to be drinking this so that I could take the ultrasound. And she's like, let me go talk to the doctor. And so the doctor comes back in. And the doctor's like, are you drinking anything? And I'm like, yeah, they gave me this bottle of water that I, started to sip on, started to get through. He's like, no, you shouldn't be drinking anything. There's a chance that we might have to go into surgery. I was like, whoa, what do you mean we might have to go into surgery? I thought this was a stomach bug. And he's like, there might be a chance that we have to go into surgery. What we're going to have to do is, if we were going to run an ultrasound, yes, you would need to have that water. But if we go into surgery, you can't have any water in your system. So now the ultrasound is not an option. So what we're going to do is we're going to have to take you back down to do another CT scan. But this time we're not going to do it with contrast, and we're just going to see what we can see without the contrast. And we're like, okay. So we're sitting there, we're kind of looking at each other like, okay, this kind of just, jumped up a notch. And they're like, you might have appendicitis, and the CT scan should point that out. So the appendicitis is obviously nothing to joke about, but it's not that bad of a surgery if we have to do it. Like, okay. So we wait for a little while, and the nurse comes back in, and the nurse is like, okay, we're ready to take you down for the new CT scan, and once that's done, we'll bring you up here and then take you into the surgery room. And all three of us were like, whoa, that is not what we discussed. We said we were going to go down to the CT scan room, get a new scan done, and then we would discuss what we were going to do. And you're already talking about taking me straight into surgery. She's like, no, that's not what I meant. I mean, we'll come back in here, we'll go over the charts, and then we'll determine what needs to be done. And if you need to, then we'll go into surgery. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of a big step that you left out in the middle about reviewing the charts, because you made it sound like we're going to go take pictures and then, we're just going to cut you open and wish for the best. She's like, no, that's not what we're going to do. So, my stress level is kind of jumping at this point. My anxiety is, really starting to get a little higher. While we were sitting in there, in the hospital room, we noticed that there was some lightning outside, and it had started to rain. I'm like, okay, well, we're ready to take you downstairs. This is later in the evening. This is probably, 8 or 9 o'clock at night at this point. And they bring in this gentleman he's a tall guy, maybe 200 pounds at the most, who's going to wheel me around in this wheelchair. I'm like, okay, well, he's just going to get in the wheelchair, and he'll take me outside, and we'll, I guess, hop in a cab and ride down the hill. So we get out, and he puts me in the wheelchair, and he takes me to the front door, and he kind of slams the the wheelchair into the door. It was a two-sided door, and he opened one side, and he just didn't move the wheelchair far enough to get through, so he hit the other door. And so he hit it once, and then he pulled back, and he tried to go through the door again, and he hit the side again. Well, every time he hit the door, it made everything kind of jump around and hurt. So they finally were like, okay, we're going to open up both doors. So I'm like, great. That's probably what we should have done to begin with. They wheel me out, and there's no taxi there. And we start walking down the hill. And all I'm thinking is, this super steep hill that's right around the corner, how are we going to get down this? Hopefully they'll just, since it's been raining outside, the asphalt's a little wet, maybe they'll just let me get up and I can just shuffle my feet down. We get to the top of this hill, and this gentleman decides, well, I've got to walk him down this in this wheelchair. And I'm like, I can get out and walk this. This is fine for me. He's like, no, I have to take you down in the wheelchair. And I'm looking down. I can't emphasize how steep this hill is. And the first thing I do is I look down and I look at his shoes. And I'm looking at his shoes, and I'm trying to guess what the traction is that this guy has on his shoes. And then all of a sudden he flips me around backwards. And so he's trying to take me down this hill backwards. And I am just holding my breath, because all I can think about is the hill is slick. His shoes, I don't think, have the necessary traction to do this. And if he is to slip, there's nothing I can do but ride this wheelchair down backwards. And that was a scary couple minutes as he slowly got me down the hill. Fortunately enough, we didn't have any incidents, and he got me down the hill. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this for right now, and we will pick this up on part 3.